So if Jesus has put that into the Lord's Prayer as one of the statements, it obviously must be very important. And today, forgiveness has become a study, even a scientific study in universities. I read that easily. And they were saying, oh, finally we have succeeded in taking out that concept of forgiveness out of the religious context and can now look at it also in a scientific way and try to understand really the psychological processes. What is forgiveness? How does it work? And in fact, we must say we human beings and also science and psychology should have concerned itself much earlier with forgiveness. If forgiveness is such a central thing that Jesus Christ has put it into the Lord's Prayer as one of the central things, it must be important, and the effects of it must be wholesome, must be good, if we get to understand what forgiveness is. And so the sentence again out of the Lord's Prayer is, Father, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who have sinned against us. Now, let's look at the second part of the sentence. Those who have sinned against us. To forgive something. Something has happened. A perpetrator has committed something which has wounded or afflicted another person. Now, I pass it on to Brother Gregory. In which way can other persons inflict or affect us so that we can be put into a state that we either say, I forgive the other person, or I go another path, I revenge myself. So what is forgiveness and how does it happen? How does the hurting of other human beings happen? Very simple question.
Well, thank you very much. I'm a bit silent. It's passing almost right above us here in Brussels.
Okay, I can hear the...
That's why I tried to put it in mute initially, but it seemed to have gone now.
Yeah, I can hear the train still. Oh, it's passed away now.
Yeah.
Well, that shows it's a real live program. We got the trains in Brussels. We know they are still running. Are they on time, Brother Greg?
Yes, they are. I was talking of the aircraft.
Oh, it's it's a plane.
Yeah, the plane.
Okay,
yes.
Very good.
Yeah. Now, the concept of forgiveness hopefully should be rightly understood. You do not forgive that which is good, which is beneficial.
Definitely not.
So, yes. When forgiveness is mentioned, it must be that which is not beneficial to all the parties. And something must have been done to the other parties concerned in this so-called equation that tends to undermine or to jeopardize their position or their status, or maybe may cause some injury.
Yes.
So in that case, we have a situation which one may refer to as having put that into creation, having initiated an activity into creation. It's like a thread has been spun which binds the person who initiated such activities. It binds that initiator to all those affected. It's now as if one is entangled with those that one has harmed. In such a scenario, we have that those who have been harmed have the right to sever that thread which has entangled them or not. Because if the thread is not severed, it means they themselves will not be able to move forward in freedom in order to experience until they have considered that particular thread or they have disentangled themselves. Moreover, if they now understand that the person who brought such or precipitated such an activity must have been undergoing maybe some challenges which may not have been done intentionally, it is found that when one deeply forgives, such threads are severed, and each person is now free to move their own ways in order to experience.
So forgiving in a way is freeing yourself from something you have been afflicted by. You have suffered a wound, and at one point the wound has healed up, and you can put the whole thing to the past. You do not feel rancor or feelings of revenge anymore. You can say, I forgive that person, I can go on now with my life and continue on my life and use all my forces, all my strength again for steps forward, freed from that injury which I suffered. That's very interesting, Brother Greg. It's also how I read an article about many of the victims who have suffered some injury, how they saw it themselves like this, and they said, I was freed from shackles, or I was freed myself, and suddenly that past thing which had happened was really past. It was not alive anymore or festering as still an open wound somewhere. And it gave kind of a number of examples. Perhaps I just bring one example, which was written in that article, and it said two young sisters, they grew up together, and one was the younger one was always in a way maltreated by the other one. For example, locked into a dark barn, and left there for some time, and the other people loved, and of course that girl was become frightened. Well, those girl and the mother all seemed always to prefer that older of the two children, and was so the younger was kind of the underdog and always a little bit maltreated by the others, and she grew very bitter about it, and they separated. That woman married, and after some long time she moved to Australia, that younger child, and there was some family reunion when they were I don't remember the age, but some 20 years on or something. Both sisters were adult now, and the mother was old now, and there was a family reunion, and that older sister was telling at that family reunion, do you remember Lydia? That was the name of the younger ones. Do you remember, Lydia, when I locked you into the barn, into the dark, and you were frightened? And well, I must say, we were a little cruel to you, but you must forgive. And then that younger one, that Lydia, said, well, no, I realize I cannot forgive. And she was very silent, and she left that and she realized that has been always dormant within her over decades, and was never really healed, and she still felt that injury alive with her, and she moved away. That family reunion finished, and she moved away home, and she began to think about it and to write that whole episode down. And she wrote it all down, and she realized that at that moment, after she had written it down, she, in a way, she could forgive that other person. And she wrote at the last sentence of her letter, "I forgive you," and sent that letter off to her sister. And her sister answered that letter a short time later and said, "I apologize. I realize I was never aware how cruel we actually have been to you, and how much we must have hurt you. We were quite unawares of that, and I was quite unawares of that." But so the story ended, and she said then after that this thing could be laid to the past. It did not fester anymore at the bottom of the psyche, somewhere suppressed. It was really past. And I think that's a state, that's a process we have to come to. I think my next question would be, that's what they also discussed in the thing. They said, you cannot forgive right away, and there's also a wrong time to forgive, especially just after the injury has hurt. That is a process of healing. You have suffered a wound, and like on the physical body, that wound must heal, and which takes some time, and only after it healed, you can and you don't feel the pain anymore. Then comes the time, can you really in your heart forgive that perpetrator who is committed, who has done that injury to you? But you cannot do it right away. And so let us talk it, that process of healing. Whenever we suffer a trauma, of course, that shakes us, and damage has been done to us. And this shaking, it's like a gunshot onto a ship. That ship shakes some time, and then you try to mend the damage and close the hole. And when everything is closed and you can sail again, then after that healing process, there comes the time when one should forgive. Forgiving too early, Brother Greg, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, there is no problem in forgiving early, depending on the maturity of the person who had been impacted by these adverse actions or adverse activities. We should not forget that even when Christ was on the cross and was suffering such horrendous difficulties with crown of thorn on his head,
Yeah.
at the last second, he did plead for mankind. All right, and that ultimate
Father, forgive,
pleading,
they
when
do
he
not
said,
know
Father,
what they do.
forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So, I mean, there is no, the maturity, the personality which he is, the divine love, did not want any reaction to come back and hit adversely humanity that had perpetrated such terrible suffering on himself. So that had to be severed. And so you have scenarios like that in which immediately, for the one who has deeper insight into the activities of life or the activities in creation, being able to, sever the connections that will ensure that the reactions or the returns, all right, do not hit too severely on those who have perpetrated them. So it varies from person to person, but it is better to forgive such that one is free, that entanglement is severed, and one may go his or her way in peace.
Yes, I definitely think so. I think, but one thing must be the case. One must forgive from the bottom of one's heart. If you are not able to do that and you just do it calculatingly or prematurely in that way, then it is not correct. You must really have come to a conclusion in your heart that yes, you can forgive the other to what has been done to him. And in you gave that example of Jesus on the cross, which is of course unbelievably dreadful, and he could forgive and ask, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Um, although he interestingly he says Father, but he's practically one with the Father. Jesus, he said that repeatedly. I'm the Son, but I was with the Father, and we are really one in Christian theology. So, but from a normal person's point of view, there is definitely, you must have overcome the thing, and you must have come in your heart to that inside, to that state where you can forgive, and only then you should forgive. There, they mentioned in that article, for example, some two married women which were talking together, and in that case, and they realized their husbands, both of their husbands, are unfaithful, and one discovered it by looking at on their mobile phone, and they could see the messages to their husband, each one to her husband's girlfriend. Now, if that situation is going on, of course, one person could say, "Oh, I'll forgive you," while he still has the other woman and still is not true to his wife and continues to commit that unfaithfulness. And I think that is not the right way to forgive at that point in time, because that's not a solution of the problem. You first have to have solved the problem. Well, the problem of one of the sisters, or of one of the women, was that she could not forgive because it reminded her what happened to her parents, where her mother's husband, also her father, was also unfaithful, and that marriage ended in divorce. Whereas that friend, she really talked with her husband, and through that experience the whole relationship between them changed, and it became much more open, and the marriage did not have to be dissolved, and the marriage went on, but both could forgive them, but only after they had come to a conclusion. One with finishing that relationship with her husband and divorcing, but then forgiving, and the other one then putting that relationship onto a better level where there's deeper understanding, and say we can put together that episode behind. It even has somehow helped us to reach a deeper understanding. And then of course she said, I'll forgive you, I forgive you. But forgiving in an unresolved situation, I think first you have to resolve the situation, and then, because forgiveness before that is worthless, that other person. Now let's talk about the other person.
May I
Yeah,
come
okay.
in a bit?
Yeah, come in, please, Greg.
We have a situation, or there was a situation, biblical, which was related biblically, the case of Stephen. Stephen was not Jewish, but he had a deep insight into the Jewish religion at that time. And for many who envied him his knowledge, when Stephen decided to go with the Christians, he was stoned to death. And even at the point of death, he looked at the tormentors and said more like a prayer, Father, forgive them this sin. He knew that they were, punishing him because he had, decided to put his lot with the Christians who at that time were striving to follow the teachings of Christ. So that is what scenario. He did not ask, he did not survey what lies what behind it. He sensed that the only way forward was just to forgive them. And not only did he forgive them personally, he also asked the light to forgive them. That is one scenario. Another scenario was that of Paul. He himself, who was Saul, who was one of the great tormentors, and as we know from the Bible, when he was going to Damascus to arrest the Christians and make sure they were tortured and killed. But on his way, he underwent some drastic changes, and his conscience pricked him in such a way that he could not rest until he turned completely, and instead of arresting those Christians in Damascus, he turned completely and joined with the Christians. It was quite remarkable that later on in his activities, when they dealt him such terrible blows, he did not take it personally. He forgave them, and he understood the basis why there was such hatred, because he himself had once harbored such hatred, and he forgave them in full, in spite of the terrible suffering he had to undergo. So you look at two scenarios, and you look at the way, due to their maturity and the realization of what they themselves have experienced, are able to forgive without unconditionally. They just did it. One unconditionally, the other one with full understanding, but was prepared to sever those connections which could hold the other parties down. For in having such magnanimity, the other party hopefully is granted an opportunity to see things differently, maybe in such a way that will help that other person or the other party to improve on themselves.
Yes, Brother Gag, thank you very much for those examples from the Bible. It is it is really quite astonishing, and I must say, Paul, Saul before, who actually persecuted the Christians, has then even found, was in spite of all this, I mean, it was really, today it would be deeply condemned. He was prosecuting people of a different belief of himself and actually killing them and bringing them on a grand scale into prisons. He just wanted to eradicate the Christians. And in spite of that, the light has selected him as to become one of the major tools to spread that new belief of Christianity and to carry it into Greece and carry it over to Rome. So, of course, that gives one an example how one really should be very careful when one condemns a person and really shy back from him. That person who might have done an abominable deed according to the current human law, once he has regretted his deeds and has come to the better insight that what he has persecuted was really the thing he should have carried abroad and really defended and convinced other people of it. I think that this instrument has been found worthy and has found grace in the eyes of God. And we know that Paul is one of the major disciples. He has never seen Jesus Christ, but he's one of the major disciples, one of the major instruments of spreading Christianity. He has become one of the major instruments of spreading Christianity. So, of course, the Christians who suffered under that persecution, I hope they could forgive him also. I guess they have forgiven him because they were really exemplary in their behavior, how they stood in for their faith and how they took onto themselves almost everything and were crucified too in the Christians in Rome. And they knew they would go into that death, and they forgave the Romans. They took that persecution happily on them to be thrown in front of lions and to be crucified. It's an unbelievable greatness, and I think everyone nowadays thinks, well, can I be really like those people standing in for my faith and being so convinced as they were that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and it is worth 1,000,000 times to die for him, because he is really the eternal life. He's life himself. So thank you, Brother Gregory, for that, reminding us of that story of Paul and Stephen. So now let us look at the perpetrator. In the case of, there's also the saying of Jesus. I think it is Jesus. I try to say it out of my memory. Something like, the sin against myself I can forgive, but the sin against the Holy Spirit is never forgiven. So that sin against the Holy Spirit, let us talk in the context of Paul. Paul has surely come to a new insight during the persecutions of the Christians, and we know from descriptions which you can read in the context of the Grail message. There are other books being published on the life of those around Jesus, for example his disciples, also Maria his mother, or Maria Magdalene, other people, but there's also that describe the life of Paul, and of course it encompasses much more than you find in the Bible, so please check out those books. It's a wonderful reading and very, very benefiting, very lofty reading. It really helps. Immediately you read a few words, you feel lighter and more in harmony with you feel being brought nearer to the light. You feel just lighter inside reading those books. And there were remarks about Paul having, for example, having met a Christian, that was Mary Magdalene, on one of his ways to Damascus, where he wondered about the braveness of that woman who just stood in his way and answered him and was not afraid of him, although he had all the soldiers behind him in that military mind, and she was on the persecuted side, and she was not afraid. And that, seeing that fearless woman and facing him so bravely and answering him so calmly and confirming her belief into God, and her belief into Jesus Christ, stating it so calmly, without perturbance, that impressed Paul, or Saul at the time, still very much. And things began to work inside of him, and he matured and gained new insights. So he had to change himself. He had to change quite a bit till he could actually work for God and become a tool for God himself, for Jesus Christ. So, and in that way he has learned his lessons. But let us look at talking about this, the perpetrator. Once he has been forgiven by his by the people he injured in some way, or he committed some harm of whatever sort to the others in the abstract, he still has to learn his lesson. Do you agree with that, Brother Greg?
Of course, the one who forgives severs that entanglement which would have remained, connecting him who has been injured with the person who has injured. However, there is also the need for the one who perpetrated the injury to come to a deeper understanding of the activities within creation or the activities in nature. Such injuries were only possible due to ignorance or due to false pride. Unless that realization dawns on the perpetrator, he or she may go on and on to commit other hideous crimes which will bind that particular person or that personality down, because that personality will feel some denseness, unable to think freely or to act freely. That particular person must have pushed his conscience aside. That is, unable to use his intuition as free as possible. Such a person is no more free and has, or from time to time, will feel a heavy burden on their shoulders, yet unable to explain it in all reality. So there is the need for the one who has perpetrated such activities to gradually understand, or maybe sometimes through intense suffering, or maybe when he or she is alone and in their quiet reflection, may come to a finer understanding, and is in understanding that you have real forgiveness. For then the perpetrator will now find out how he or she, due to ignorance or pride, has caused so much confusion. And now knowing that they need to change their inner attitude. For it is the inner attitude that had been the problem.
So we definitely know the perpetrator has to go through a maturation process, gaining new insights. He must understand what he has done. As long as he has not understood it, he will not get out of that situation he's in. And I think should be that which forces him into that situation, which doesn't let him get past that state he's in. This is that the Holy Spirit who does not forgive, who just waits till the perpetrator has changed, and then of course he can go forward and ascend a little bit and take the next step.
The activities of the Holy Spirit ensures that there are returns, for the Spirit, or the Holy Spirit, embodies the laws of creation. And one of these laws is that of reciprocity or reciprocal action, which ensures that whatever a man has sown, that is what that personality will reap. So it is the activities of the Holy Spirit that ensures that this happens. And therefore, it is important that when the returns come, the person involved is able to recognize why these returns has come their way and is able to learn the necessary lessons. For if these activities, if the returns, the reciprocal actions come and embrace or touch the person who first gave rise to it, if that person is not matured enough to understand and to make amends, then it means there is no change, there is no inner change in the personality, and we keep on suffering under such conditions. But as soon as that person recognizes the purpose of these returns and is able to learn the necessary lessons, then we have an inner change such that when the returns come back, because he or she is no more in tune, just like you have in wireless telegraphy, you find that the returns do come, but they only affect the person very mildly. And it only, in some cases, means that the person involved only need to have some symbolic redemption by doing something which will satisfy the laws through which they themselves came into being. So you find there is so much variation, and the activities of the Holy Spirit, which ensures this reciprocal activity, is only a help, not a punishment. A help to induce the person that first gave rise to this to reflect deeply and make amends and then move on.
So let me just summarize a little bit the points which we have discussed so far. So we've said in the act, in the process of forgiveness, there's always a perpetrator and a victim, and the victim can forgive the perpetrator, and that frees that relation. Otherwise, even that victim would have bound itself to the perpetrator. If he would have thought of revenge, for example, that would have been a continuous bondage to the perpetrator. So the victim, on its own, having come to that to that state where he can forgive, has this tying himself to the perpetrator and tying himself to that, not being able to let loose that
Right.
inflicted injury, and always circling around that injury, and which wastes his energy. Well, through being able to forgive and say, I can let this thing behind, I do not care anymore about it, he can move forward. That is the victim. On the other side, the perpetrator who has inflicted that wound, the perpetrator must learn where he has gone wrong, and Brother Greg has described that now in many facets. There's the straightforward way, but once he has gained the insight where he has been wrong, brother Greg then mentioned there is also something like a symbolic a symbolic
Redemption.
redemption. And perhaps we talk later a little bit about this. Let me just talk about that first part of of that again. There's a good example in the Grail message. The Grail message does not give a lot of examples, but it gives something which really give you a firm foothold, and that's why we propose to read the Grail message. And also, you feel that you get a whole complete picture by it in the end, and you feel how the whole thing, how creation works, and you can convince yourself in the end by looking at real life and see, oh, I can explain that happening in real life, looking around myself. And so for me, that Grail message was the only convincing thing which I could find in reality, again, in all the things which passed around myself. Now, just to go back, there is an example of a young woman with a daughter, with a very young daughter, having committed suicide by drowning herself in some body of water, some river or lake or something. And she finds herself in the beyond, going all the time through that drowning process again. So she drowns and drowns. But and I do not know, I do not remember exactly, but a very, very long time, that might have gone for years or for decades, this awful process of feeling itself drowning again, feeling the water rise and feeling the suffocation. She suddenly begins, a new emotion awakens in her, the emotion of at least saving the child. And she holds that child above her head. And that is the first step of her gaining a new insight, of maturing inside. Some compassion for her child is awakened in her, and she tries at least to save the child. There's some very interesting fact what Avtoshin describes there. The child itself is in fact not the child actually which drowned with her, because that would be really unjust if that child would have to drown because his or her mother has decided on committing suicide. So that child, that real soul of the child, has been put to some place where people are treated in the beyond by helping beings to overcome that trauma too. But that for that mother, she does not know that it is not the child anymore. It's just a body a thing which exactly behaves and moves like the child and is indistinguishable from that. So even in that example, Avtoshin shows there is, however you go at something, there is no injustice in everything is provided for. Let us talk a little bit about just that process of symbolic redemption a little closer. And why is that possible, that symbolic redemption? That person has gained an insight, Brother Greg, and some new things would befall. It has perhaps done something else through the same fault. Let us say he has, and that same fault, he committed that same crime or those same injuries to other people. But those ones, because he has gained the insight, he does not have it does not have to feel the full repercussion of those actions. How can I imagine that, or how do I have to think about that?
Yes, it's quite simple, in the sense that when you have a deeper insight into the activities within creation or activities within nature, humility forces you to adjust your own personal activities to or conditionally swing within the laws which you yourself have now recognized. Such adjustments requires deeper understanding. And in adjusting yourself, one rises higher, because in adjusting yourself, one is in tune with the higher energy which streams through creation. And in making use of it aright, one is able to rise higher and higher in such a way that as this power streams through you, it permeates your immediate environment. That means you feel lighter and lighter. However, the returns of the past activities still need to come, because you were a shareholder in these activities. You have your signature in these activities. But because one has made changes in one's inner ways, and the energy that streams through you is able to permeate your environment, similar to the atmosphere of the earth, when the returns come, they are either burnt off or they do not strike you as severely as they would have done. However, in completing that cycle, it only requires that you do something such that it also swings with the unconditional reciprocal action that will help to elevate you higher and higher in such a way that it brings blessings to others. For in the past, one only thought of oneself, but now, in one's realization, one is thinking of others, not only fellow human spirits, but other beings in life, in creation, the animals, the atmosphere, the surroundings. And it is these responses that help to elevate the inner man, such that some base threads are severed. Base thread being severed means one is not in tune with these heavy vibrations anymore. So their effects, even when these heavy vibrations approach, their effects on one is minimal, because no energy channels, all right, are attached to you, since you do not show any understanding to these things anymore. You are now a reformed human being, a reformed personality. So this is where symbolic, all right, deeds do help, because one is now prepared to cooperate in loyal service through one's activities to the laws of creation and to one's fellow human spirits who, like him, have come here to earth to experience and also to sever themselves when the time comes in order to rise higher.
Yes, it seems that symbolic redemption is a rather simple concept, but in spite of its simplicity, it is incredibly difficult to explain to someone who has not thought himself or herself through that process. But yes, it has been now quite eloquently talked about it, and if there's still some non-clarities, of course, we only skim the surface of the Grail message, and we perhaps the best of us, we feel, I think everyone, I can talk for everyone, would say it's an endless source of wisdom, and we just scratch the very surface of it. We must be really humble about it, and that concerns definitely me, or everyone I think who talks on that program thinks the same way. So you have to deeply look at that work itself and this wonderful thing of symbolic redemption, where you don't have to get the full force of the reciprocal action, you don't have to suffer the full force of the reciprocal action, but you can symbolically redeem it. It's a wonderful process which makes our ascent into the luminous height or towards the light much easier. What I wanted to talk to you, another thing, of course, it is best if we go through life without injuring other people, with the intention not to injure another person. And Arthur has given a new law in the Grail message. I let Brother Greg try to word that law in his this new law. Brother Greg, can you tell us about that, which really would avoid that we injure other people and that we get in this thing of having to being injured ourselves and injuring other people? In which way?
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for that dimension of that. Before one goes into that, one will stress very clearly that although we discuss these matters, that is not the end of it. For anyone who has the strength to examine the work in the light of truth, we wish them well. They shouldn't just take our words on our discussions for it. They themselves need to go in, to dig in, and keep digging for the treasures, for the wisdom that has been associated with it, such that they themselves will come to finer and finer understanding of the rightness of what had been written in this work in the light of truth. Now, when one looks at situations, one finds that in all, what one referred to in all scenarios, there are helps which have been woven in which the human spirit, by the human spirit, one is referring to the inner personality, not the intellectual, as is understood nowadays. That helps have been woven within the scheme of things. And we all know that we ourselves have come here to experience. We would not like anyone to act in such a way as to burden himself in disturbing us or making it in such a way that we are injured. That being the case, we are not special, as we do not want any injury in our experiencing. We ourselves should not go and injure others in their experiencing or in our experiencing. That law is such that when we go and do things which undermine or injures others, then a thread a spawn which binds that person who has been injured to ourselves. If, however, in our activities, we go about in such a way as to be of help and support to the other party, then in reciprocity, the laws of creation through which we all came into existence will enhance our development. So the new law, strictly speaking, is very simple. Go in such a way such that your activities do not hinder but help you to rise back and to mature. That is only a summary that one may mention here, where one, if you have the strength to examine this work, then you can dig yourself into it to have a much fuller understanding.
Thank you. Yes, let me just, this law, it's kind of, Atoshin says, now I cannot word it exactly, says kind of, we are allowed to go through creation and enjoy creation as long as long as we do not afflict any harm on another person. And that is wonderful. So it really says we can enjoy, of course we can enjoy. The creation is there to be enjoyed. If we walk with Sadie with a long face around it, that would be a slap in the face of God, because that creation is a wonderful creation. But through our walking through creation and enjoying it, we must watch out that we do not harm any other people. And that is a great safeguard in coming into situations where forgiveness is necessary. But the other great part, how I understand Christianity, is that wonderful other saying in the Bible, which is so often misunderstood, which also says, in other words, it says, if something happens to you, do not worry about it. Just look after yourself, look at yourself. Do not worry about the other person. Just forgive him. And in the Bible it is expressed like this: if someone slaps you or slaps you onto one cheek, just over the other cheek to him. In other words, that is not something meek. Just do not worry about it. You have so many wrong things inside yourself that the best thing is just forgive the other person, forget it, just offer him the other cheek. People have interpreted, or people of other beliefs often have interpreted it as a sign of weakness. What would you say to that, Brother Greg? Is that a sign of weakness in Christianity, or is it a sign of strength?
Actually, it's a sign of strength. The emperor, like the old saying goes, the emperor is not the one who inflicts so much suffering on others, but the one who understands the challenges of others and is prepared to sort of help. That means for you to help, you must have the necessary qualifications. Maybe haven't gone through such scenarios. So to be able to receive blows from others and yet forgive them, similar to the deeds of Paul. He himself haven't gone through, but at that time, he was the one who dished out the blows. But now he understands He had the power, and yet he was filled with restraint, filled with understanding. That is the purpose of Christianity. For was seen with the early Christians who had to forego many things in order to spread the good word and to spread the truth to other nations. When they went out, they didn't take any gun. They only had the word which was in their hearts, and that is what they brought to others, without shouting it on them, but showing through their examples that this is what the Lord demands of fellow human spirits. So it requires much maturity to be able to proceed along such paths.
Thank you, Brother Greg. Yeah, I think it has become clear in the talk up to now what great human beings those early Christians were. They went through, they had their belief, and they stood in for their belief, and if they were persecuted or were victims of persecution, they suffered blows, they were victims. They said, in view of this high thing we've got, this high knowledge we got, and this conviction about Jesus, these blows, they mean nothing to us. We can forgive them right away. And in a way it even highlighted what they had. It made it really precious for other people to see who are those people who suffer to be thrown in front of lions, or who suffer to be nailed to the cross, or they were bound to the cross, I think, in Rome, not nailed to the cross, who suffer to be bound to the cross, and could forgive their enemies, and said, this is all unimportant in view of that great thing we have, and it is just worthwhile even to die for it, and I can forgive my death. Truly wonderful examples. I think it has come out during that discussion. Now, in that article which I read, which was in one of the psychology magazines, and I can't give any name because I'm not a psychologist, and our psychologist brother unfortunately couldn't participate today, but it said there, it talked also about cyber mobbing and victims of cyber mobbing, and it showed that those victims of cyber mobbing, which could forgive their perpetrators, they even, not only were they quite more happy and regained their balance after they were able to forgive, but they also became much less victims, considerably less victims than the ones who could not forgive. So there seems something, even by forgiving, you cast away that role of the victim, and become much more self-assured, and you become not anymore the target of so much hostile activity. That's quite a wonderful thing, and with that knowledge of the Grail message at hand, many of those findings, you can explain exactly why that is, and perhaps at some later time, perhaps even once our brother William is back, who works in that field, he might spend some more time on those research results. One other research result in that article was about people in some scientific experiments. They were given two paths. They were inflicted wounds in a game, and they suffered something, some injustice or something. But they were given the option either to at the one game were chances were given to them to revenge themselves, and the other group didn't have that chance. They had only to the option either to forgive or just to live with that injury. So it showed a quite interesting result, which was that the ones who could revenge themselves had a very short buzz or kick. They got a kick out of it, but that was very short lasting, and and after that they felt even as depressed or even more depressed than before, whereas the ones who could forgive, they actually regained their inner balance. And I think forgiving is really to come back to that state where this shock, this blow you have suffered and has shaken you, that those vibrations have become weaker and weaker and weaker, and you have refound your balance and can go and you can now move on strongly. And definitely revenge seems not to be a good path, and scientific experiments seem to prove that you might get a very short moment of satisfaction, but you do not regain any inner peace and any inner stability. Now, I want to ask Brother Greg, revenge, that would be the other path the victim could take, and many cultures, they cultivate the idea of revenge. Do you have some thoughts of that? I might.
Yeah, actually, like you rightly said, some cultures cultivate this idea of revenge. However, these cultures seem to have forgotten that revenge is some form of distraction from one's long established goals. For if you have decided that the way to the highest is noble and you wish to focus on it, and someone comes and tries to distract you, you will not listen to such distractions, or you won't be taken quite easily along such distraction. Another example one could give is if you have a child, a toddling child, or a little toddler, you will focus your attention to assist that toddler to grow up. If there is a bully around the neighborhood, you will not focus on trying to revenge on whatever that bully has done. All one needs to do is to be on the alert. For alertness is the first key. To be alert at the sort of vibrations within your neighborhood, and also finer vibrations from above. For in alertness, many a thing can be prevented. But revenge is only a distraction, distracting one from the high goals which is worthy of the human spirit.
Yes, revenge definitely seems not to be a good thing. And I remember in why do people seek revenge? Often it is because their own honor, they think their own honor has been insulted, or the honor of their family. And in Italy, I know in Sicily, there were family feuds between, most of the time, I think they were probably mafia related families, but I'm not sure about that. But I know in my youth, those family killings, they were all the time in the news, and they went on in South Italy and Sicily, where something happened to your family, of the other family, I don't know, through an accident, killed another one. Then the family revenged itself and shot one of that family. And that went on through generations. And in one case, I remember that there were 50 people. The one of that family killed the other one. Then there was a revenge that killed the other one of another family. Then the other family started a revenge. And there were a chain, a never-ending chain. And it seems with revenge, we get those never-ending changes, because none of the parties, of the two parties, comes to the point where he has the insight, oh, I did really something wrong, and I probably was not quite so right as I thought doing this, and I was wrong in doing the first step, and that is, say, injuring or harming someone of another family or killing them because he was a rival family. Otherwise, if you just, and this insight is only that insight which comes to you where you stop revenging, which breaks that chain of revenge. And we have to break those chains. They are stupid chains, and they cause nothing but more harm, and the families get more and more entangled in a never-ending thing. So I think now this I've really improvised a little bit, because I've never thought about so much about revenge, and but it definitely is not the right thing, and science has proved it is harmful. And to break the chain, we have to come to a process to let the wound heal, and that does not happen with revenge. The revenge, always that wound is reopened because a new injury is inflicted, and on that injury again another injury is inflicted. So the wounds are never able to heal, and the families consume themselves, killing each other's off in the end, destroying themselves. And so the way out of this chain of revenge seems to me really to learn to understand what forgiveness is, and really to heed, to think about that statement in the Lord's Prayer, and forgive us our sin as we forgive those who have sinned against us. And for us the first step is learning to forgive those who have sinned against us. That frees ourselves to go towards a new horizon, to go towards a better place. And so we have pretty much talked about all I can think of. We have also talked about revenge, how to avoid to come into that situation, to inflict things onto other people. And we really should also look at the other 10 commandments, perhaps. Also those 10 commandments looked in the light of forgiveness. They really make sure that you do not afflict harm onto other people. Like, let us talk about this, about looking at the 10 commandments might be quite good here. A wonderful advice which has been given to Moses, and which is pretty much one of the most wonderful parts of the Old Testament. And if we just look at some law, you shall not steal. Certainly stealing is inflicting harm on someone else. And this is, of course, a warning. Think about what is stealing, what does it entail, and keep away from it, because you will start injuring other people. Could you please elaborate a little bit on that, Brother Greg, on the concept of stealing, and in the context of that law, you shall not steal?
Well, in the 10 Commandments that was given to Moses, where it says, "Thou shalt not steal," to steal something only means to take something away from someone without one's consent. So when you've taken something away without the consent, it's like one has stolen. That could also mean one's character. One can spoil one's character. That is some form of stealing. It could be goods, as many may also um, alluded to. However, what is important in this case is what had been summarized, that you are free to enjoy the goods and the goodness of the environment and what has been provided. But in doing so, do not harm your fellow traveler or your fellow human spirit that is also trying to do the same. So when you steal from him either goods or his wife or the husband or whatever, one or his personality or his reputation, when damage is done to this, there is more like stealing from that particular person. What the person has built up, one tries to damage it or to take it away forcefully or by cunning when there is no basis for that. So these were the things that were granted to the people of Israel at that particular time. But what is quite remarkable is that when they, the people of Israel, went and had left Egypt and Moses was guiding them, they had to fight wars. And you could see how quickly they disobeyed these commandments, which had been granted to them faithfully, so that they can purify and not soil themselves. And the consequences one can read from the Bible. So the concept of stealing must be well borne in mind. For strictly speaking, it is the concepts which we hold within us, which either block the paths for better understanding or enhance the paths for better understanding. For if the concepts swing unconditionally within the laws of creation through which we or everything came into existence, such can only make us rise higher. If, however, these concepts are dense and almost meaningless, then we are unable to find our way to the higher realms from whence we came here on earth in order to experience.
Yes, I've just been thinking myself about it, about stealing, which is definitely harming, and this law harming someone else through that act of stealing. And you mentioned stealing has really to be redefined, it in compares someone's reputation and whatever. Let me and I just was reminded of something which happened very early in my childhood. I was under 5 years old, and I had a collection of chalks, stones, or chalk stones, where you could draw nice things on the floor. And I had a very big one, which probably had at some building site. They left some chalk which dried. I had a very good, nice collection, which I had on the balcony. And I was playing on the street with two girls from the neighborhood. And suddenly I could see how the two girls were chatting to each other or something saying to each other, but I didn't quite realize, I was not so alert. And one of the girls said, "Rainer, why don't you let us why don't you show us this big piece of chalk you have, that very big one? And I was kind of, I remember still, I was kind of astonished a little bit, and also a little bit reluctant, because I had to go up through the garden of our house and up the first floor and go into the flat where we lived, and I had it on the balcony there and pick it up, and I didn't want to go up, but they were kind of saying very sweetly, just go, we just want to see it. And okay, I went up and got the chalk and went down to the street again, and as soon as I placed it in front of them, one of the girls grabbed the piece of chalk and ran away as fast as she could, and she had stolen it. And I felt really cheated, also astonished by the cleverness it was done, to say just, oh, we want to see that piece of chalk. And that process, that memory is still with me today. And I must say, in a way, I'm quite glad that it happened. Of course, I do not know the girls anymore. I do not know who they are now, where they are now. And of course, I've forgiven them, because it was just two little girls, and they just had what do they call it? How do you call such a ruse, or a clever ploy?
Yes.
A clever ploy to cheat the other persons, but you feel really bad after that, being cheated, and you feel kind of really angry. I remember that I was angry and at the same time powerless, and knew I couldn't do anything against it. And in later life, I was pickpocketed 2 times later life, and the same thing happened again in the same pattern. There was some kind of clever trick of distracting my attention, and then the pickpocket person tried to relieve me of of whatever he was after, which was my money purse, of course. And
Well, it's always like that. That is why there is a need to be on the alert at every time.
yes,
Maybe that is one of the lessons you needed to learn, to be on the alert. But as a 5-year-old, of course you are trusting. You wouldn't have thought that someone would want to, in happiness, you want to share, which is what most children do. But when such happened, you are stunned. You wouldn't know what to say, because you would have told your friends you have this piece of chalk and all that. And you now have to tell them, look, someone nicked it from me or just stole it. And you will feel very bad. And I can assure you, you'll feel bad for weeks, if not months. But that is the world in which we live in.
yeah,
The only thing one can do for oneself is to be on the alert.
yes,
All right? Not only intellectually, but also intuitively,
yeah,
such that many a thing, can be avoided, which things maybe bring some karma to the other person, or some bad karma to the other person. So what one intends to do is, when one is on the alert, you're able to not only help yourself, but also help the other persons by not providing an opportunity for such a thing to come into place, to take place.
yes. I definitely think that's a very good point you just made. We live in a certain world, and we have to wake up to that reality. There are not such nice fellow human beings around us, and they try to get something from us. They steal, and they do it by some clever ploys normally. And to be alert when such a clever ploy comes, and even sometimes when one is alert, I could tell another one now comes to mind, which happened quite recently, about 2 years ago, but I think I won't. Perhaps I do, because it's another thing. But you feel harmed, and the thing is just to say, okay, you lost 50 pounds or something, just forget it. But remember, take it as a lesson. People are like this, and try to not give them the opportunity to do it. Be careful, put your purse into a deep pocket and or zip it in or somewhere. Things like this, very simple precautions in that case, because it's a very simple act of harming another person, stealing something. And let's get on with our life and forgive that person. But another thing might be, of course, where forgiveness is very, where you have really to admire people, like if you are in a terrorist attack and in the London underground bombing, and I read that a woman had lost, a young woman, and she was quite beautiful, and she had lost both her feet in that attack, so she had to go on crutches. And now, being all her life without her feet, I think to forgive there, that really takes some greatness. But I honestly do, in those extreme cases, I do not know how I would react. I cannot be certain how.
I think you are being factual, because until one had gone through such an experience, and sometimes which one does not pray for, it is difficult to know how one will respond to such scenarios.
Yeah.
To be able to forgive, because as with that lady, she has to live the rest of her life here on earth in such a condition.
Yes.
So it requires some inner strength and inner maturity, such as one can only have if one at that particular moment were to turn to the streams from on high, through which one will have inner peace. For it is those strengths, those streams of power, that silence the thoughts about revenge, which revenge may then drag one further, deeper and deeper into the depths.
Yes.
So it is such activity that will ensure that you turn your gaze upwards, from whence peace can descend into one's breast.
Thank you, Brother Greg. I just see something on the monitor has appeared another person apart from you, Brother Greg, and I cannot make out who that is.
I didn't even see that.
It's a man in a suit. Hello, is there anyone else in the conversation? No, that just seems to be on one of the studio monitors. So so unfortunately, I do not know how to receive any questions of listeners, and I really would like to receive some, but I do not quite know how to handle that phone. The Brother Bless has not shown me into the machinery here, so there was just the program before, and I was just placed in front of the microphone, and here I am, just with.
Well, you have done remarkably very well, because there's always a first time when one is in such scenarios, and whatever lessons have been learnt will be, I think, will be helpful to many others, because the discussion had been highly informal and yet quite remarkable and interesting for many, and that will enable them to have deeper reflections.
Yes, and
which is the purpose of it all.
Yes, and it would have been wonderful to be able to receive some feedback from some of the listeners or from listeners at all. But actually, he didn't show me how this.
Well, if there are feedbacks, how would you know if
Yeah,
you
no,
weren't shown
yeah, I've
how
got.
to
I,
pick up the feedbacks?
yeah, I
How would you-
got here the Bless Radio handy, but I don't know where the responses are, if anyone, if I should press WhatsApp. So I think we have to go improvise on, or go on with the conversation. I hope it's interesting to the users, and we try to figure out some other aspects around, but always in the light of forgiveness and of this thing, because we actually have to wait till the people of the next show come, because there's no one here. So risk detected and block. Okay, now it's becoming really interesting. So I close that. I don't know what that risk is. So we talked about. In fact, one can say everything which has been given to us through Jesus Christ, and also in the form of the Old Testaments, it is really to make sure that we do not entangle ourselves with our fellow human beings. And we entangle ourselves in a negative way by inflicting harm. And one of the laws was with stealing. Stealing is a terrible thing because you feel yourself betrayed. That's what I felt as a child there. I felt myself betrayed, and this sense of feeling betrayal, that's a kind of injury. And many people, like if in a long-standing marriage, that's the case they mention, or they quote in that article I read in one of the psychology magazines of my wife. She felt betrayed by her husband, and it was doubly harmful because of the duplicity of it all. Suddenly you are faced with a person who you trusted is full of duplicity, is lying to you because never mentioning it to you, is having excuses why he's coming home late, and he meets another woman. Unfortunately, it is most of the times men who are unfaithful in that way, and they pursue their pleasures, but in spite of having promised to a person beforehand in the church vows that they will go together through good times and bad times, and they would go hand in hand towards the light and be truthful to the other during that life on earth. They have really broken that contract between man and woman, or that promise, that human word which we can esteem very highly. Those words are as much worth we put into them. We make them valuable by meaning them earnestly, and having broken such a vow is a terribly devastating thing for a woman. For a woman, I actually know, and it can actually bring about, that harm can be so strong that it can bring about the death of a person. A woman might die of a broken heart. People die of broken hearts, and there's actually even a physical illness of a broken heart. Physically, there is something like a break of the heart. So it even goes as far as the body. This saying is just not a saying. This dying of a broken heart because a relationship, because the trust between two persons has been broken. And in that review, it also mentioned that young people, one of the things they most of the times fear is being that trust being broken by a person very close to them. I think they think of a partner or a friendship or something, two friends, a man and another man. If you break that trust, that is also inflicting a wound. Brother Greg was talking about it, about stealing the reputation. That can also be the good opinion to destroy the good opinion of someone by slander. Slander is also an injuring thing. Let's take that kind of injury of slander, which is very common. Make some nasty, undermining remarks about the character of another person. Let's ask Brother Greg if he has some ideas of that kind of injuries, which are based on taking away the good reputation of someone, of slander. Is there coming something to mind, Brother Greg?
Yes, there are, well, I say, unfortunately, here on earth, that is what you find almost everywhere, where with slander, stealing, and many other kindred evils which you find everywhere. But at the same time, we had discussed the concept of being on the alert to be able to perceive things and prepare oneself such that the hurt or the injury is not a grievous injury. One must know that one is on earth, where that which is good and that which is not so good coexist. One must also be, aware that there are many people who are not matured enough and therefore could cause a lot of injury, and therefore should not expect too much more than what they or the surroundings or the environment can give. And therefore, one should prepare oneself for the challenges ahead. For if you do not expect too much, you will not be disappointed. That means one has to be realistic as to what one expects from fellow human spirits who, like yourselves, are challenged in making decisions. You may have a spouse, but you do not know the challenges he or she is undergoing. And therefore, one, through experiences, should put some form of buffer and be prepared to assist a fellow traveler in such a way that he or she, even if it had fallen, will be able to get up very quickly and continue with the journey. This is where forgiveness also comes in. This is where alertness also comes in, such that you are able to protect yourself and also help your neighbor. And that is part of loving one's neighbor as oneself. Not only protecting yourself, but also supporting, not only in deeds, but also in words or in thoughts. Sending out good thoughts to help prepare the environment such that we'll have lighter and lighter souls, or to help purify the environment, not only the physical environment, but the ethereal environment which surrounds many a person, for it is the density and the denseness which makes some of these things possible, because many have hideous thoughts. So there is also that need to understand one's environment and give heed to it in such a way that you are able to help yourself and help your neighbor. For if one does not do that, the likelihood is that there will be continuous disappointment, be it from a spouse, from a friend, or from persons you don't even know. For, like he said, one does not know how one may react in a particular scenario, like the one you give example of, where someone in a terrorist activity blew up the legs of another. Now, to ask that lady to forgive, it may be something very difficult. But if you had asked her much earlier, without giving the right thoughts to it, may just skim over it. So we kept stressing, there's the need to be on the alert, but at the same time, to be realistic, to be aware of your environment, and should not expect from the environment more than what it can give.
I think to summarize that evening's talk, the main points, one of the points, the last point, we have to be alert and see our environment in the way it is. In the way it is, that means seeing it in the light of truth, not having illusions about it. And that also saves us from a lot of harm which can befall us by trusting the wrong person. I think that being alertness, we can also take further to also become clear. When you do any kind of act, might it a business deal or might it that you think you want to pass to marry someone, be really sure that you are doing the right step. And there's a German proverb, who wants to bind himself shall try each other for a long time, shall look at each other, shall examine each other for a long time. That you are examining the other person to prevent that you are being harmed, because you live in an illusion. We cannot live in an illusion about another person. If that person is not good enough for you, because then you should not marry it, and you should come to that insight before you marry that person. You shouldn't take that step afterwards, because if you are delusioned, in a way it's also your own fault, because like Brother Greg said before, you have not looked closely enough at the other person. You have not examined deeply enough the other person. And that requires inward mobility, a spirit which is alive, because only with such things we can look through the nice talk someone is giving us, or through the sales talk someone is giving us. What can we trust it or can't we trust it? And only the spirit can know that. And that helps us from get it injured. Many times, if such a thing happens, I think we came to the second conclusion, that forgiveness is by far the best thing we can do. Let the wound heal and offer your other cheek. We have talked about this statement. If someone hits you on one cheek, offer the other cheek, which is so closely related. It's practically saying the same thing as forgive the other person. You feel much better. You have your own balance again. You don't suffer still the shock which every shock you suffer brings you out of balance to some degree. You have regained your balance, and it's in the first thing, forgiveness is in the first place for you, because, and we also talked a long time about that, once you have forgiven the other person, that other person is still subject to the laws of creation, the Holy Spirit, which are the laws of creation. We said he has to learn his lesson, and he won't get around that lesson. And he will be stuck in a situation where he has to learn that lesson. He won't get out of that situation unless he has learned that lesson. And to see it in that context, that perpetrator He has to learn, he has to come to an insight. If he does not come to an insight, in time, there's even a time where it is too late. We talked in some past lectures, we talked about it. Creation, or the system of creation, will then get rid of those elements which refused to learn and disturb the workings of creation. The system cleans itself. That is very hard to say, but we human beings, we live in creation, and creation gets rid of disturbances. So that has all to do with forgiveness. So there's one point which we didn't mention so much tonight. The perpetrator of an injury, normally in that process of recognizing where he did something wrong, there comes that emotion of remorse, which is a lot being talked about it. He starts regretting what he's done. And that regret, remorse, I just find, Brother Greg, we have not talked explicitly about it. So I think...
Well, we just skipped about it, but for other lectures to come, one may make reference to regress, regret and remorse, because it's an inner turning away from the activities it was engaged in and in trying to improve itself. And this is sometimes what brings symbolic redemption, having recognized the roots of many of the problems and trying to make itself better, more noble,
Yes,
and in such a way severing
yeah.
those ignoble threads which hold it down.
Yeah, a very important thing, probably the first steps, the first movings of one's emotions, of one's spirit, that, well, you have done something wrong, and we should be so alive inwardly to feel the remorse much quicker. If it takes a long time to come to that stage where we feel remorse and realize we might have done something wrong, that's really late. But we keep that for later sessions, and we can talk a little bit more explicitly about it. But we have talked about the perpetrators too, that I just said he has to learn his lesson, and creation, the Holy Spirit makes sure of that. And with that, I say goodbye to all the listeners. And Brother Greg, would you like to say something?
Well, I wish them all well, and should find time or find the resources to examine the work in the light of truth.
Yes, and thank you to all the listeners for staying for 2 hours with us. And I hope to see you next Tuesday evening again. Goodbye, everybody, and see you next week. And I pass it on to Bless, who will probably play some wonderful sunny reggae music for you.
Thank you.
Power is the ability to define someone's reality and have that person accept that definition as if it were their own.
Everything was stripped from us. That's why we're so ignorant today and so baffled and ridiculous and keep going in the same circle.
From executive producer, who has appeared on The Tonight Show, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and various MTV and VH1 programs.
Our history, for some reason, it becomes offensive to people. So we have to stop being afraid to tell what our true history is.
Best-selling author Tariq Nasheed is determined to uncover the real truth about untold history.
It's necessary to destroy a man's mind in order to maintain control of him. If a man knows who he is and continues that into his legacy, to his children, then you have problems controlling that man.
Interviewing leading scholars and historians, discussing topics omitted from modern history.
Only a people who haven't learned how to respect themselves will let someone suggest themselves that they forget about the history.
Hidden Colors, the untold history of people of Aboriginal, Moor, and African descent. The groundbreaking documentary that challenges conventional knowledge.
I don't really think it's hidden. It's there. It's just that they're not allowing us to understand.
Well, this is the higher meditation because these are the times right now the earth is moving in a positive vibration. People, them are wake up and rise up. These are the times that we are talking about. Keeping it positive, keeping it real. King Selassie, Rastafari, govern the earth and the people them. You see me, I say, yeah.
Rastataya, Rastataya, Rastataya. This is the Shaka from station to station to tell the generation and the nations. Rastafari. Education is the key. All youth strive for development. Rastafari. Love is the key. Give them that. Give them that message from.
Them a wonder how blessed we do this. I see them come with tongue. Future prophet tell them we locks get longer. He then heart it and it. Brass radiate, you don't know. Pop the good music. Play them.
Best FM no cigarette smoking in my room. Yeah, I still want Marley. Best FM radio, play good tune.
Here exactly why is it that Rastafari would have locks and he which they say that they praise and revere, which is Haile Selassie, he doesn't have locks. And as I said before, it's a genuine question, so we're definitely going to give it a genuine answer. And what we intend to do, we intend to kill two dogs with one stone here. And specifically what we're going to do, we're going to also speak to the question, where is the Trinity found in the Bible? All right. Now I know when I said two dogs. You see, this is what's so disgusting, Now really, I'm going to be very straight off with you. Even from time to time you hear, even from my lair, I'm looking out the window and my neighbors there be beating their dog, and I complain about that. I despise when people do that. Beat their dogs, any animal. I see people riding horse and donkeys. I hate to see people whipping them. Although I have the horse and the donkey, I'm telling you straight, in a different level than the dog, for sure. But I mean, I wouldn't even hit the dog. But make it attack me, I would kill it, for sure.
You're listening to Bless.
But here's the point now. If I was to say I was going to kill two birds with one stone, nobody would say anything. I mean, I've done this many times. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to kill two dogs with one stone. And people get upset. Why you say that, brother? And then I say, if I said I would have killed two birds with one stone, you wouldn't get upset. Then they would say, well, let's not kill nothing. I agree. But if I did say, kill two birds with one stone, you would not have said, let's not kill nothing. This is what I'm talking about. So these phrases that they give us, all of this is a part of our culture that we have to now, follow along with what we have been given to speak. That's why we always say they take away our language and our culture and our stories and our phrases. So now we're killing two birds with one stone and nobody have nothing to say. But the moment I say we're going to kill two of men's best friend with one stone, you start to jump up. Get in front of the slave master himself when we're looking to bust his head open and say, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do what? The same dog that ran you down and hunted you in the forest when you were trying to escape for your life. The same dog when they dig the pit and they covered you and left your head out and said, sick 'em, covered you with blood from some other animal and told the dog to sick 'em and he ate you to the skull. The same dog, they give each of you a dog now. You know, well, you don't even know what's going on. But give thanks for the Black Christ King Emmanuel, although I know not Bubble have the dog. Teach us we don't keep dogs. Straight up. I mean, if you want to turn off now, because I know we're so gone. Eh? We are so gone. But anyway, to the subject at hand. Now, I think I would like to begin by saying, before we go into why Haile Selassie doesn't have locks, because to be very honest, it would have been good, you know, if you could have got that answer straight from him. You know, it's depending on how old you were. It wasn't that long ago when he was, you know, in our presence, seen and felt in the sense that, you know, he was there in Ethiopia, the 225th monarchy, etc., etc. Okay, so that time has passed, and I will definitely be answering this for sure on a theological level. I don't know if that's the exact way he would have answered it. Yeah. But I think first I would like to go into why Rastafari have locks. What's the locks thing about? Now remember, I did a documentary right here, London Radio Anu, on the YouTube. It's on my YouTube channel. You could visit my YouTube channel. I think that's the best thing you could do, is to visit the YouTube channel and, you know, go through the different videos that we have. Everything is a hit straight up. And you could definitely look for the video entitled You Don't Have to Be Dread to Be Rasta. I think that's what it's titled, right? Yeah, you should check it out. You Don't Have to Be Dread to Be Rasta. And, you know, we gave a little comprehension of the science of the locks and everything. And there was this lecture that I had. It was an audio lecture, so I wasn't really seeing the visual. And I think it was Dr. Leonard Jeffries. If it wasn't, I think it was Dr. Leonard Jeffries. But anyway, he was giving a lecture. And he was saying, he was highlighting the locks on the head, or if it's not Leonard Jeffries, it's Brother James Smalls. Yeah. But anyway, they were highlighting the locks on the Egyptian head, the Kemetic, whether it was sisters or brothers, but they were highlighting the locks. And they were saying that they had these beautiful locks. And one of the reasons that we carried locks because we did not, or we may not have invented the comb as yet. I said, okay, that's interesting. So what they were hinting to me there is what we've always been saying, that from creation, because that's what they were talking about. They were talking about creation, creating, inventing, making up the comb. So the comb was not invented yet. The comb was not seen as something necessary from what the elder scholars were teaching there. So, okay, interesting. Showing now that, again, Rastafari as a culture, not a religion, but as a culture, is something that takes us to the origin of our civilization. This is what it is. So you may observe the Rastaman move in a specific type of way. Again, the locks, the matted hair, I think people call them freedom locks or something now. I mean, wow, things are really changing. But the matted hair or the locks upon the head is not only just because they didn't invent the comb. We're talking about the specific type of hair that the original man has as well. That night ether hair that literally curls. You don't have to stick it together with nothing to make it look as if it's locked.
Bless Radio.
Because our hair, as the black man, it actually locks. You know, because the hair is a lock itself and it locks into each other. And there you have the locks. Naturally, no extra thing has to be done. Just brush it back and you see what happens. It doesn't just grow long. Brush it back and it will naturally lock. So you can see now, even in the form of the original man. That's why you see the sheep with the wool would have a lot of the locks. You know. Okay. So when you comprehend now, that science connects you with nature. It connects you to the cosmos. I heard one scientist say that your hair should be at least three inches in height or length. I'm speaking of the afro itself, 3 inches going up now to connect you to the heavens, because the black man, the hair of the black man is like the antenna, the spiral, and the spiral is the best antenna that you can have. So there is that natural importance when it comes to the locks. It has to do again with the figure, the expression, the identity of the original man. It's not just rebellion against Babylon and you don't want to cut your hair and all of that. You could add that to the whole entourage of reasons, but the science of this locks is the connection with the sun, the connection with the planets, the connection with the movements of the comets. Yeah, all in the locks, and how it is prepared and taken care of, and even as Bobo Shanti, as you can see how it's groomed and how it's wrapped, and the colors that ordain it at what time and what day. It's a science that we're dealing with. So the point now is that the Rasta man, the Rastafari, Rasta man, Rasta woman, Rastafari, the original one, you could jump high and low, all they saying, well, if you were the original, who you were praising? Selassie wasn't there, and man, people get into all kind of things. But the point is, Haile Selassie was born in 1892 on the 23rd day of July, according to the Gregorian calendar. We're talking about an ancient culture. I'm talking about the culture from the beginning of time. That's the point I'm making. Now, Haile Selassie is a spirit. And to be very honest, your spirit and my spirit, I mean, you cannot give a date to the birth of your spirit, really. You know, you cannot really compare when you were born in this physical form to your eternal spirit that has existed from eternity, really. So the point is now we're talking about the original creation and the original culture, and the locks is a part of that. The ital eating, what they call the veganism now, is a part of that. It's not just because the Bible says so. It's not just because Numbers 6 says that the Nazarite shall grow his locks and all of that. It's not just because we saw the Mama, you know, in the war with the British soldiers in there in Kenya. But again, all of that inspired the movement. All of that, you know, obviously had a part to play in the growth and understanding of the anciency. I mean, the biblical scriptures and the historical events, they do go hand in hand. Fair enough, and just the rebellion against Babylon as well, all of that, it goes hand in hand. Good. Now, what it is, the reality is, you know, when you comprehend the history of Rastafari, let me just throw in a bit of this too. When you comprehend the history of Rastafari itself, like I can speak of Antigua, and I think in general in the Caribbean where Rastafari really was birthed, I think the history of these different islands and territories are basically the same. You have a group of people, again, who were rebelling against a system, and they took up that nature. There was this spirit in them already, where they took up that nature of rebellion. They took up that nature of, again, matting their hair, locks in their hair, or just not cutting their hair, and growing their beard. They took up that whole culture of retreating to the hills. You know, they took up that culture of planting their food and eating what they grew. They took up that culture of stop cooking all of that meat, even though some may have eaten fish and different things. But the point is they were dropping down the hog and putting away the goat and the sheep and all of that. They were taking up this culture. They were reading their Bible. They were praised. That's one thing about them. They were keeping to their biblical philosophy, and they were calling on the living God, and they saw a Jah in the Bible, and I mean, it went to a mystic level, you know. And then from afar, even in Jamaica, from afar, you heard of the coronation of Haile Selassie I. And it is then, I'm telling you straight, if you understand the history, even here in Antigua, in the place they call Jungle, those people that are the first set of quote-unquote races that rose up. The point is, the fact is, and they will tell you, they're still around, they will tell you, at first it was not directly about Haile Selassie. They will tell you that. It was just this rebellion, and they knew of Marcus Garvey. It was like they're following Garvey, you know, but on a kind of rebellion level. And Garvey told them about the king in Ethiopia when they really understood what this king in Ethiopia thing was all about. And they noticed that the Bible was saying that, listen, this man shall come and he shall be crowned King of Kings, and he shall be crowned Lord of Lords. In Revelation 19, you can see it on his thigh and on his vesture, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And they said, wow, that's interesting. This man that was crowned in the 2nd of November 1930, he was crowned King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Oh, some people say, oh, just a name, a title. Yeah, but hold on. The same Bible saying that he shall be of the lineage of Solomon. The book of Acts, you know, Acts is saying that God himself shall rise up David to sit upon the throne. You know, the throne of the lineage of Solomon. Well, yeah, well, you know, but wait, hold on, man. But the Ark of the Covenant, I read in Tim Hector's newspaper, the Workers' Voice, not the Workers' Voice, oh, pardon me, Fan the Flame, the outlet. I saw this whole story that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. That's some interesting stuff. Wow. But this same Ethiopia is said to be the oldest Christian country, the oldest Christian tradition, the first Christianity. In fact, they separate from Rome. This is some, wow. Read it in the book of Acts, where Philip baptized the Ethiopian eunuch. Okay, and he went back and Christianized, if you want to use these terms, Queen Candace. The ancient Christian order actually began under a woman, you know, not King Izana, Queen Candace, if you follow that narrative of the Bible. So this is some serious thing. Okay, wait, hold on. Back to Selassie now. You mean to say he's called the Lion of Judah? Look here in Revelation 5, chapter 5, verse 5. It said that only the Lion of Judah was found worthy to take the book and open the seals. And wow. Let's check this man out properly now. Forget all them things. Wait, is not he the man that went and pleaded before the League of Nations? Yeah, but all that in the Bible too, now, boy. He shall bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Real thing. He said he shall speak unto them in the book of Zephaniah. He shall speak unto them a pure language. Yeah. Zephaniah chapter 3, a pure language. Wow. Pure language. That's Amharic. That's what he did. He spoke unto the League of Nations in a pure language. Yeah, I mean, it's not. Who says Amharic? The same book. He says the language came from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Right in the same book. Wow. Bible we talking. Okay. He shall speak unto them a pure language. Wow, this is some serious stuff. Haile Selassie. Yeah. Selassie I. Jah. Rastafari. And you know, man start to trad now and say, yeah, man, this is the return Christ. That was the word, you know. This is the Messiah. You know, in reality, enough man was still saying Jesus, but they say, Jesus come back. As the Black King, and I start to rise, chant and sing and accept the King, you know. Yeah. And even in them times, a lot of the older folks and those who are in denial would say, so wait. Selassie will come to Jamaica, you know. Yeah, me see me now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you never see me. Yeah, me see. You just come. Selassie no have no locks, you know. Okay, here we go now. Selassie no have no locks. How is it Selassie don't have no locks? New locks. You say he is the Christ. You even say Christ have locks, although you don't have no picture for really prove that. You know, but you say Christ return now as Haile Selassie. So you say, right? Okay. So where his locks? Some of us will, the answers you would get, one of the answers you would get is that Haile Selassie had locks at the age, as a child. And there is, you can see the picture of him as a young child with the matted hair, the locks. I think at the age of 7, those locks were taken off, trimmed off, you know. I've seen people get themselves into trouble by using that for the answer. So why trim them off then? Why trim them off? Well, it's an Ethiopian tradition. Yeah. Anyway, and then now to be clear here, you know, a lot of us have some real man up to this day, man. I have some brothers that be telling me some kind of thing that tell me when the emperor crowned, he had locks. Locks was all under them crown. Come on, man, you still talking them talk. When we came into this, we heard a lot of that, and the emperor had locks when he crowned, and some man would tell you the emperor never went to the barber. I say, you're right, he never went to the barber. The emperor have his own personal barber. What are you talking about? Someone tell you, no, it's the supernatural powers. Supernatural powers and the emperor. The hair just don't grow. I said, what are you talking about, man? Man, they have time when the emperor afro high and when it come back down, and sometimes the beard. The emperor have a lot of beard. You check those pictures when the emperor beard is in his fullness. Before he was crowned, the emperor full of beard. What are you talking about? Sure, anyway, let's get serious. Good. I would like to use the Bible. The Bible is going to be like a key source for this reason here. In the book of Isaiah chapter 7, so I'm putting Haile Selassie in the line of prophecy. And for the audience, listen to me good. In the answering of this part of the question, I'm trying to deal with this, you know, in all light of history, prophecy, evidence, plus understanding. I'm not trying to prove nothing to anyone. I'm not trying to convince you to be, you know, no believer in what, you know, I may quote unquote subscribe to. No, I'm just trying to show you a reason to answer the question, one of the age-old questions. So you don't have to agree as such. The most you have to do is understand. That's all. Good. You can understand something and you're not a part of it. Okay. A Muslim can explain something to you that you never comprehended, why they do this or why they say that. That doesn't mean you're a Muslim to just say, oh, okay, I understand. That's all. And by the time I'm done, you are going to say, oh, I understand. That's all. Isaiah chapter 7 is that chapter, that book. Isaiah, in general, as we have spoken of before, is the messianic prophet, meaning he speaks in depths of the Messiah. In fact, his presence as well is also highly symbolic of the presence of the Messiah. And this is Isaiah. That is why we speak of the book, the Ethiopic book known as the Ascension of Isaiah. As you can see, Isaiah, like the Elijah and like the Enoch, was said to have all ascended. Enoch, a very key character here. Yeah. So in the book of Isaiah chapter 7, if you notice, Isaiah mentions the name Emmanuel twice. And Isaiah also mentions, and Emmanuel is mentioned a third time in Matthew chapter 1 verse 23. And it's all numerical here because Isaiah chapter 7 verse 14, and you know the cycle of life, and you know 7, 14, 21, 28, 7 days for the week, 7, 14, 21, 28, the month and the cycle, and 7, 14, 21, 28, the cycle of the woman, 7, 14, 21, 28. So Isaiah 7 verse 14 mentions Emmanuel, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son and call his name Emmanuel. And then in Isaiah 8 verse 8, the 8 and the 8 now, which is the cycle of Venus, every 8 year making a 5-point star. You don't know the 8 is infinite, the only number except 0 that you could just keep drawing it and you don't stop. You just keep drawing it because it has no beginning nor no end. The 8 on its side is the symbol of infinity. So the 8 now, you know, the 8 verse 8, you see Emmanuel again. And as I said in Matthew 1:23, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. Trinity. So it's found 3 times in the book and sealed up with 1, 2, and 3. Oh my goodness. This is a solar Masonic book we're dealing with here, straight off the bat, whether you like it or not. That's really what it is. That's why it's in the courts. That's why you swear to it. That's why it's in the hotels. I mean, child. And it says here in the book of Isaiah, verse 20, speaking of this Christ, the Emmanuel figure. And of course, I'm sure we all know Emmanuel means God is with us. So, in all clarity, Haile Selassie is Emmanuel, for it is God with us. You know? And I know why I said that. Verse 20 says, and in the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired, namely by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall consume the beard. Okay. Now, that's just one verse I just pull out, you know. As you know, I read chapters, but I just pull out that one verse. It's a very poetic, and I would say it's a very esoteric chapter too. There's a lot of esoteric vibrations in it. Talks about milk and honey he shall eat, you know, these different things. A man shall nourish a young cow and 2 sheep. It's a lot of different, it's poetry. But if you've been listening to our lessons, by now you should be able to comprehend how to take poetry and understand where history is somewhat weaved in the midst thereof, and comprehend the science, because it's history here. Speaking of the coming of an Emmanuel, you know, several have come, you know, yeah. Oh my goodness. But this Lord now, in that day the Lord shall shave. The Lord shall shave. Okay, if we're gonna, let's come down to ground level. We dealing with history and just being literal, you know. So if we be literal as literal can get, the Lord is shaving. I mean, just clear as that. The Lord shall shave with a razor, and the razor came from Assyria, the city of idols.
You're listening
by
to
the king of Assyria too.
This is George looks saying keep it locked.
And he shall even consume the beard. We were just speaking about the beard. Do you know, I did an interview with a good brethren of mine. Well, he's like an elder to me, although he was saying, he ain't no elder or something like that, but it's all right. But I did an interview with a brethren of mine, myself, Brother Zugu, with Bongo Ras Mike, Ras Idash, right here in Antigua. And I definitely have to put that video up, do a little editing, because he did some cursing in there. I don't put up cursing on my channel. I mean, you can't even come in my house and be cursing no bad word. So I don't really, you know, if we're out in the street, you can talk how you want. It's your mouth. I ain't got no problem. It doesn't really bother me as such, but I mean, I just keep a certain standard. I don't speak it, so I'm not. So I got some editing to do before I bring it out. But Ras Mike was saying in this, and you'll see for yourself when we put it on YouTube, man. Ras Mike was saying, well, Ras Mike is a man, he's not into no Bible. Ras Idash is also known as, he has an idol shop, one of the longest standing idol shops in Antigua. I think he needs an award for that alone. And Ras Mike he doesn't deal with the Bible at all. At all, no way for nothing. And he has this concept of Haile Selassie first, the throne of Ethiopia, being the throne was ordained by British and the House of Anglo-Saxons and all kind of things. That's his theory. So it's not no genuine Ethiopian throne. And when as I said, when I put that interview up, you'll see where he's coming from. I'm not gonna say I can see I'm not going to say I could see where he's coming from, but I could say I understand why he's talking like that. Let me put it that way. I could understand why he's talking like that, but I challenged him, and I challenged him to prove it, because he cannot really prove it. But I could comprehend. And it comes, and listen, it comes down now, because I know some of the rest saying, boy, to put up no interview, boy, fire on them talk. But hold on, man. It comes down to the same reasoning on Haile Selassie and being a Mason. If Haile Selassie is a Mason, I hear people run from it and, boy, fire on Selassie, no Mason. Well, let me tell you straight, Haile Selassie, what Mason? Haile Selassie, in my fullness of all praises and honor to Negus and the gospel. No, man, Haile Selassie is not a Mason. But then again, that's why I said this is not really a yes or no answer. Just for clarity, I just had to say that to you, but this ain't no yes or no answer. His Majesty was a member of several Masonic institutions. Straight up. Nobody can deny that. I can't deny that. And yeah, man. And I feel good saying what I say. I know people screwing up. So when we do the program, is Haile Selassie a Mason? Yeah. Anyway. I'm saying all that to come back to this verse. Now shave with a razor and consume the beard and all of that is more than just shaving. As I said, on ground level, there it is. The Lord shall shave. Look at there. On ground level, ground zero, earth bound. There it is. We're not even on the tarmac yet. There it is. The Lord shall shave. You got the answer. The Lord shall shave. And hold on before you run. The fact that the Lord shall shave shows you that the Lord doesn't shave. You see what I'm saying? So this is like a grand event, because the Lord shall shave. He shall even consume the beard. Remember when they disrespected some of David's soldiers? They cut off their beards, or cut off half the beards. They cut off half the beards. And David told the brothers, hey, he didn't tell them shave off the rest of your beard and come home. He said, hey, you stay out here until your beard go back. Oh my. And then you can come home. Say, wow. That's to show you how important the beard is. So he shall consume even the beard. And the emperor always had a beard. The emperor ever have a beard. But I'm trying to show you